The most confusing discussion in the profession of journalists concerns the question to what extent they are able to approach reality openly and without prejudice and therefore objectively. Confusing because the discussion is actually about something else, namely the question, what is truth and what is reality? That question immediately throws you into an almost bottomless philosophical pit. Are we talking relative truth, contextual truth, analytic truth, synthetic truth, necessary truth, contingent truth, universalist truth? Are we working with Platonic or Heideggerian views of truth? For the good cause, let's word a little less precisely today. With the question what is truth we scroll fast forward through the last 25 centuries. The short answer is then, in the beginning truth was universal, then it became particular, and finally there was no truth at all. We need to talk about the latter, because that's about today. Look, we once agreed. The earth was the center of the universe. It was good to burn witches. Michelangelo made art. Then we started discussing, was James Joyce farsighted, nearsighted, otherwise eye disease, or just as healthy as a cockatoo boo? That of Stellark, that naked guy with those meat hooks through his body, is that art? And Pierrot Lunaire, Arnold Schönberg's atonal composition, is that music? From universal truth we made the journey to individual truth. Fewer and fewer people felt obliged to adopt the general truth from a higher authority. And from individual truth we traveled to a provisional terminal, no truth. We live in that era today. It is, I think, still a relatively young era. I am reminded of a recent interview with the American writer Rumaan Alam. He said, politics has become a spectacle, a performance. Politicians have always lied, but now you can lie and it doesn't matter anymore. That is actually a recent phenomenon. Bill Clinton lied about his affair with Monica Lewinsky, which nearly cost him his political career. Trump lied all the time. We have become accustomed to politicians, CEOs, civil servants, high commissioners, ministers, presidents, people who turn the knobs of the world, putting up a curtain of fog around the truth. Alam said, it is a recent phenomenon. He means between Clinton, who almost lost his job in 1999, and Donald Trump, who could cheat non-stop and publicly between 2017 and 2021, there is only 20 years. In those 20 years it was possible, within the same democratic bed, to transform the lie from an almost unforgivable political blunder into a conditioned political identity. Although I don't think we should refer to Trump as the tipping point in the transition from private truth to truthlessness. He, as a global ruler, has played an important role in this development. His opinion about what would be truth and what would not has had a major impact on people worldwide. It is not without reason that the fake industry experienced a glorious revival under Trump's rule. Undeniably, his strategy of everyone lies but may catalyze many other individuals and organizations. If the boss of the world is allowed to do it, then so can we, they awaken the child in themselves. What exactly did this boss of the world do? Mainly this, ostentatiously distancing himself from the democratic habit to the best of his ability to pursue the truth and view reality as it is. As if that were not enough, he also constantly questioned other people's truth and reality, the truth of individuals, but also that of democratic institutions such as the media, science and the judiciary. They all had to believe it. They were fake as hell. Ironically, that pathetic lying and truth swindle culminated in the celebration of American democracy. The election, Trump obstinately contested the legitimacy of the result. This, hitherto unseen among influential Western leaders, dealing with truth and reality brought us irrevocably into the new era, the era without truth. Until now, we had to deal with a fairly clear reality, a bit exaggerated. There was truth and there was non-truth, or lie. What that truth was, or where it was, and what was a lie, there were differing views from Plato to Clinton. It went, as I briefly explained, from a more collective experience to a strongly individually propagated truth. But from now on we had to reckon with a third perceived reality, one that turned out to be outside the realm of particular or universal truth. We are talking about a reality in which what we see, hear and experience is no longer determined by the journalistic media we use or not, social media, influencers, YouTube, TikTok, podcasts, Clubhouse, or whatever, but by asking all those sources. Namely, is this real or is this fake? After all, in the reality we live in today, everything we see, hear and experience can be real or fake. But because no source and no democratic institution, not science, not the judiciary, not journalism, not politics, can make a universal claim to the truth, that truth no longer exists, we determine ourselves, based on our particular media menu, what is true and what is not. As if this isn't complicated enough, there is fake news, there is fake justice, and there is fake science. Only there is no overarching institute that shows us what is real and what is fake, because the autonomy, authority, and authenticity of that institute are no longer recognized and therefore no longer exist in fact. And so it may happen that democratic institutions established in our present era are labeled fake and that highly disputable sources pass for lecterns of truth. For example, millions of people worldwide may believe that the global elite are secretly members of a satanic pedophile society, of which Hillary Clinton is the president. For example, it can happen that members of a democratic parliament sit at the table in a video conference with a deepfake of the chief of staff of a Russian politician. And so it can finally happen that all over the world critically ill corona patients with faces twisted with regret beg for a vaccine. If only they had been properly informed, they confessed to the doctors. It is remarkable that exactly there, at the front of the corona pandemic, in the hospital bed, where people are fighting for a human life, that is precisely where the old patterns of truth and lies cast their faint shadow. I'll come back to that in a moment. At the same time, the same hospital bed tragically makes visible how endlessly decadent the illusion of a truthless reality is. When it comes down to it, we know exactly in which syringe the rescue is located. Do you also have déjà vu? You take the blue pill. The story ends, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Indeed, The Matrix. 1999, the pandemic clearly demonstrates that we ourselves are at stake. Every day, hospital bedside doctors experience how fake news, misinformation, and ghost stories from friends and family have led patients astray. Sober, right-thinking, and educated people can resist the nonsense all they want. It doesn't help one bitch. They are simply part of the elite accused by a section of humanity. Reality and truth have unmistakably ended up in murky waters. Whoever uses the classic tools in his search for truth runs the risk of being confronted with advanced deepfakes or intelligent misinformation. Those who, on the other hand, have put those classical instruments in the trash take matters into their own hands. Neither one nor the other escapes the recurring question. Is it real or is it fake? Is it true or false? Is this the real chief of staff or a deepfake of the chief of staff? Is corona caused by 5G or is it a virus? In short, we are all in the same boat. We question not only what we think is fake, but also that which is apparently true. As technological sophistication advances, the line between the two will continue to blur. It is not entirely unthinkable that we integrate the fake reality into our real reality. We're going to see it as a full part of it. With these developments, we will be definitively deprived of our view of the truth, of our own truth. In other words, we have definitively deprived ourselves of our own truth. And so, again, we ourselves are at stake. In part, of course, this is abstract prophecy. When we descend into concrete reality, we discover that there are still some obstacles to overcome before that. But ironically, I must first place a disclaimer. I perceive those obstacles from within my bubble, in which I accept traditional democratic institutions as truth-seeking or truth-loving. I am thinking of the democratically elected parliamentarians, The judges, the journalists, the scientists, the artists, all of them professionally and are intrinsically driven in search of truth. But I am also thinking of the now growing Generation Z, dubbed the True Generation by the renowned consultancy McKinsey. The True Generation searches for truth about the climate, about production chains, about racism, about gender. You can discuss the political or social outcome of that quest. The authenticity and necessity of that quest has been extensively researched. The young people are quite serious. To limit myself to the profession that I myself believe can form a serious obstacle on the way to total truthlessness, journalism, I think these professionals have an important role to play. However, that role does not come naturally. On the contrary, now that the distinction between truth and non-truth is becoming more and more diffuse, they will have to find their place again, because on the front where there was once a fight between truth and falsehood, there is no longer a clash of arms to be heard today. Journalists should be elsewhere. But where? In a way, journalist Rob Weinberg, editor-in-chief of long-reading platform The Correspondent, answered this question in an opinion piece in which he criticized his own profession for being, during the reign of Donald Trump, there he is again, continued to be the United States as if it were a democracy, when he believed it to be an autocracy in the making. According to him, the way in which the news, and therefore the press, dealt with this was problematic. I quote, "The problem with news is that it mainly focuses on what happens and much less on what unfolds. News shows the world at its deepest level as madness and arbitrariness, insensitive to structure and pattern. News is like a diary without memory or future prospects. It tells about today, while yesterday has already been forgotten, and it pretends that tomorrow does not exist. News warns, but immediately forgets what for, and thus does not learn from its own sirens." Right there, I think, lies the challenge for media in the next decade when it comes to their position vis-à-vis the third perceived reality, where real fake and fake can be real. Journalists will have to develop a narrative in their own work, a narrative of their own, a counter-narrative. Such a narrative presupposes a constant, a line, memory, construction, a learning curve. As long as journalists continue to report like frogs in the pan on the constantly delirious technological developments in and around the fake industry, of its consequences and dangers, without recognizing a structure or pattern in it and analyzing and interpreting it, they will be fine with it. Be cooked. Only by distancing themselves and choosing their own line will they be able to continue to position themselves as a watchdog, as a post, as a hindrance or whatever. That means very concretely that they have to name racism as racism, conspiracy theorists as conspiracy theorists, sexism as sexism. This means that they have to apply the adversarial credo in the appropriate way, not by placing a conspiracy theorist opposite a scientist, but by verifying the sound of scientist with scientist B, by avoiding any appearance of a conflict of interest. For example, the one between commerce and journalism. No more paid press trips, no more advertorials that are barely distinguishable from journalistic content, or that between journalism and politics. A thorough reconsideration of the sometimes incestuous relationship between the two seems desirable to me. By describing reality cumulatively, one mistakenly racist comment does not make a politician a racist, 10 in a year does. By creating a better balance in the news supply at different levels, give positive developments more space at the expense of insignificant blunders and minor suffering. Think of an alternative to the cynical calculation number of deaths divided by distance from the Netherlands as the standard for journalistic urgency. By making quality again take precedence over quantity, or the urge to score. Stop the gasping live blogs that mention every counted vote of an election result. Instead, invest, for example, in historical context in the miracle of democracy. Produce long reads as an antidote to the 280-character mentality, just to name a few things. Journalism writes its own, partly old, partly new story along this route. She retains and regains her independent value in a reality in which truth and lies coexist under one roof. She dismantles these poisonous nests of fake news and misinformation. As the critically ill vaccine refuser on a hospital bed sees the light, the fake industry's customers will discover at a crucial moment the untruthfulness, falsehood, and relativity of the illusory discourse. They will beg for truth and truthfulness. This is not infantile wishful thinking. It happens. Recently, in the midst of a resurgent fake news industry, against all trends of the reading, and despite Trump's analysis that the New York Times was doing so poorly, the circulation of this authoritative newspaper has grown rapidly. In the first months of 2017, the number of digital subscribers grew by no less than 300,000. European newspapers the same. Their print runs just kept growing and growing. In times of turbulence, such as major attacks, you more often see readers flocking to search for reliable information. Several editors-in-chief explain the increase in subscribers. The inevitable result that the journalistic media achieve with their counter-narrative will be a widely shared trust. In a sense, this narrative is already written in the DNA of journalism. She has everything to be that counterpower. More specifically, it doesn't have to become it, because it is that counterpower, but she is not self-evident. That essential characteristic must also be recognized and acknowledged in her. For that recognition will have to be fought harder than ever. After all, now that the patent on truth-finding no longer lies a priori with democratic institutions, including the journalistic media, they will have to recapture it at all costs, whatever the cost, because something is at stake. The question that matters is this: do we, journalists, offer citizens a vaccine against fake news, or do we let them wander in the fairyland of the fake industry? At best, the latter ends up on a ventilator, and that ventilator is, cynically, very, very real.